Family is the most important thing in the world. But if your whole family, like every last one of them decided to jump down the bottom of a well and they're all just hanging on the end of a rope, how can one person be expected to pull them all back out? You can't. So you pull on that rope and you're just going to fall right down to the bottom of the well with the rest of them.
Did you hear that?
Mm-hmm.
Should we look?
Maybe it was the bears.
And why does everyone blame everything on bears? Okay.
You got anything better? I mean, like zombies, aliens, time-hopping Draculas?
Ryan?
Hey!
Hello, my friend. Welcome to the show.
Hey everyone, it's Soul here, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. You guys have been so incredibly supportive and loving towards my Until Dawn and Dark Pictures anthology videos. So, as promised, today I'm going to be discussing Until Dawn's official successor, The Quarry. So strap yourselves in for quite a long video because with all the different pathways and options in this game, this video ended up being a lot longer than my Until Dawn one. But same as before, there will be a bunch of timestamps in this video, so feel free to skip around. Now, just to give a little bit of background on my prior knowledge of this game, I was actually following the initial release of this game, had followed the trailers, and I sat my butt down to watch Jacksepticeye's playthrough when it first came out, because, as I normally do, I watch playthroughs before I end up buying and playing the games myself. However, I do remember being just a bit bored with the end of the story when I watched his playthrough. I'm also just not a huge fan of werewolf stories. Like, they're good, but, some people get really obsessed and absolutely love anything related to werewolves. So my initial reaction after watching that playthrough was just a bit meh. It was alright, and I never actually went on to buy the game or play it myself or even watch any other playthroughs at that time. That is until the other week when I started to look through, revisit, and play the game myself in order to make this video. After having done all of this research and playing through this game myself, I have to be completely honest. I don't know if I like this game or not. I definitely love the storyline, and there's so much about this game that got me really excited, and there was a lot of things that I genuinely enjoyed, but I have to admit I grew increasingly frustrated and felt really torn about the endings of this game, and while writing this script, I definitely got more and more disappointed in it. So while there are definitely moments that I dislike, especially in regard to these endings, there's also some really great things in this game. I have so much that I want to discuss with you guys, and I'm really excited to be analyzing this story because aside from the upsetting endings, the multitude of different pathways, the story, and the characters, they're all really fascinating and fun to look at. Before we jump in though, my birthday is actually coming up on October 1st, and it would be the most amazing birthday present ever. If you guys are able to get me to 1,000 subs, I would really appreciate it. As always, please remember to hit that like button, click subscribe to see more videos from me, and leave a comment down below. Here is your one and only warning that this video contains spoilers. Alright, grab your silver shells and crystal ball, and let's sprint into it. The Quarry is a video game developed and created by Supermassive Games and published by 2K Games. It was released back in June 2022, putting it almost 7 years after its predecessor, Until Dawn. This interactive horror drama game follows the outline that Supermassive has become known for, a butterfly effect decision-based game in which a bunch of characters have to survive one night of extreme terror and danger. The Quarry is directed by Will Biles, who also helped with the writing for the game alongside Graham Resnick and Alex Farnham. The game has an all-star cast of experienced and talented actors with Ted Raimi, who plays Travis, Siobhan Williams stars as Laura, Skylar Gisondo plays Max, Abby is played by Ariel Winters, Grace Zabriskie is Eliza, David Arquette plays Chris Hackett, Constance is played by Lynn Shay, Lance Henriksen is Jedediah, Ethan Suplee plays Bobby Hackett, Ryan is played by Justice Smith, Halston Sage stars as Emma, Jacob is played by Zach Tinker, Nick is played by Evan Ivagora, Miles Robbins stars as Dylan, and last but certainly not least is Brenda Song, who plays Caitlin. Honestly, at this point, I'm waiting for the Sprouse twins to star in one of the Supermassive games, since we've now had London Tipton and Maddie in them. Get that sweet life of Zach and Cody reunion in the Supermassive company. But in all seriousness, though, I say it every time, but I have to give the actors, especially in this case the main counselors and Ted Raimi's character, a huge round of applause for taking on these roles. There's so many different lines that they have to memorize and so many different pathways that they have to record, and they have to be able to perform and act in a way to try and keep their character developments on track and consistent. It is a massive and really unique job that takes a lot more time and effort than just a regular TV or film role. Their performances are truly amazing, and just bravo to all of the actors. Before discussing the plotline, I just have to point out the amazing graphics and character models. I am always so impressed with the graphics of these games, and with this one in particular, I am blown away by the facial expressions and the movement of these characters. With this being the company's sort of feature-length project, it definitely had some of the best mocap and facial reconstruction than any of the Dark Pictures games, despite the fact that The Devil in Me came out after the Quarry. There were so many times when I was playing this game that it looked like a real movie. Now, I know there are some annoying glitches, namely Abby's hair tends to spaz out and dance around quite a lot. For me, it happened more in the pool scene. And while I definitely agree with the complaints that people have, that they should have fixed this before the release, I don't think that it should overshadow the amazing things that's going on in the rest of the game. If you are able to look past some of the minor glitches in this game, it is visually stunning. I also just want to add that I personally love the design choices made for the werewolves. I love everything about them, from their crazy eye colors that seem to determine what level of werewolf they are, if they bit someone or not, to the explosion of blood type of transition that they give us. None of that long, dramatic, body-stretching transformation that we see a lot of times in other werewolf films, but just at the snap of your finger, bam! Right away, an instant werewolf is in front of you. I absolutely loved it, and once again, as someone who's not the biggest werewolf fan, this was just awesome to see. Going off of the visuals, the audio is definitely interesting. When playing it myself, the music choices and the sound effects, they're done pretty nicely. I personally think they could have used just a little bit more of an intense filler music to have in some of the chase scenes, but it's also not the end of the world that it wasn't as dramatic as it could have been. I really enjoyed having real songs in the game. I think having songs with lyrics is something that I forgot happens just because a lot of the Dark Pictures games have this ambient, more instrumental sort of background music, so it was nice to have some more songs in this soundtrack. I think the best moment with the use of music had to be the scrapyard scene, just because the metal music was so cool and so fun when all of this action was going on. Also, just the goofy music while showcasing who lived and who died throughout the night, that was hysterical and absolutely genius. Just happy-go-lucky, boppy kind of music while we're looking at dead bodies on screen. I can't deny the fact it made me laugh. Now, I absolutely love when developers and games play around with the panning, reverb, and ambiance effects to the audio. So I absolutely loved any time that we had Eliza haunting the group, since that's when those effects were used the most. The intro scene with her is just the best because we have that one-ear whisper, and it's so clear and so quiet and so direct. And it's right after having all of this echoey noise throughout the woods. That contrast just immediately sends chills down the spine. It is so cool. I would absolutely love to have one of the Dark Pictures game really lean into the use of the audio more like this. They did it a little bit in The Devil in Me, and obviously these scenes with Eliza, but if they do, it would just be so terrifying and so cool at the same time. However, there is one huge mistake that the developers made that is almost unforgivable. The fact that there is a streamer mode that wasn't a true streamer mode, it caused a lot of gamers to have issues with copyright, and it's just a huge problem. It's kind of like the saying, you don't bite the hand that feeds you, and Supermassive essentially did just that. They caused their dedicated fans, and also technically their free advertisers, to dislike or at the very least feel some sort of annoyance towards the company, even if it was just temporarily. It's also just a bit sloppy on their part that they missed such a crucial thing after adding a whole other mode specifically for streamers in what was supposed to be the company's big release of a game. So with the audio visuals out of the way, what is the exact story and plot of The Quarry? Well, we start off with Laura and Max, camp counselors on their way to summer camp one night early. After seeing something jump out in the middle of the road, they swerve and crash their car in the woods. Max attempts to fix the car while Laura searches the area thinking that they might have hit a person. After finding remnants of a traveling show and hearing a voice in the woods, she runs back to Max and they attempt to leave. Suddenly, a suspicious-looking police officer arrives and he tows their car out of the woods before telling them that they aren't supposed to be at camp until tomorrow. He then says that they should go to stay at the motel for the night. Ignoring the creepy cop, they end up going to the camp anyway, where they break into the cellar after Laura thinks she saw someone down there. Max is then viciously attacked by a creature, and Laura, after trying to help Max, is drugged by the sketchy cop from earlier. Fast forward 2 months to our camp counselors waving goodbye as the bus drives the kids away. Caitlin and Jacob are loading up the car as they talk about Jacob and Emma's big breakup. In an attempt to have one more night with Emma, Jacob ends up sabotaging the car by either destroying the fuel line or taking the rotor arm. With Emma and Abby having retrieved their bags from the cabin, they load up the final things into the car as Ryan gets the keys from an anxious Mr. Hackett. The car, of course, does not work, and Mr. Hackett freaks out, panicking over what to do, but he ultimately drives off in a rush, demanding that the counselors stay inside the main cabin all night long without making noise. With no kids and no adults around, Dylan suggests that they have an epic bonfire party, and so the group get to work. Our 3 couples each have their own flirtatious scenes, with Dylan and Ryan finding Mr. Hackett's secret surveillance room, Abby and Nick finding one of the secret trail cams and having an encounter with a wild boar, and Emma and Jacob find a gun and fireworks that they end up bringing to the party. Meanwhile, Caitlin spots a strange light over on the island. The group go on to drink and play Truth or Dare, leading Emma to kiss Nick in an attempt to make Jacob jealous. It definitely works, but it also upsets Abby and causes both Abby and Jacob to run off in the woods, with their respective partners following them. Nick and Abby share a moment of reconciliation in either the form of a heartfelt conversation or a kiss before Nick is attacked by a monster-like creature. Abby then tries to save him before she runs back to the group in fear. Ryan then takes the gun and goes to find Nick, getting there in time to see one of the hunters, who we as players have been seeing stalk the group since Mr. H left, dragging Nick away. Ryan either shoots the hunter or Nick bites him to get away as the hunter then shoots his finger off. Nick and Ryan make it back to the group, but meanwhile, Emma and Jacob have been having a flirtatious skinny dip in the lake before Emma swims to the island and Jacob runs to find the others after hearing gunshots and screams. On his way to rejoin the group, Jacob gets caught in a trap, only for one of the hunters to pour strange blood on him before letting him go. Once with the others, they all discuss what's happened and Jacob and Ryan fight over the gun before Jacob once again leaves the group to go and rescue Emma, while the others make their way to the main cabin to try and call for help. With the phone line cutting out as they call the police, Ryan and Dylan take the second shotgun found in the office to give to Caitlin before going to the radio hut to once again try and signal for help. Meanwhile, Emma is alone on the island and she wanders to the treehouse where she is then attacked by a monster while vlogging for her YouTube channel. Having searched the bags and found bear spray and a taser first, she is able to defend herself and is able to escape the island through the zip line. Back in the lodge, Nick begins acting strange towards Abby while Caitlin loses her gun after an encounter with one of the hunters named Bobby. The 3 of them are able to escape and they start to head over to the radio hut. Ryan and Dylan are able to get a signal out over the radio, but it's only heard by the hunters before the hut gets attacked by yet another creature. Dylan gets bit in the process, and in a gruesome yet commonly picked option, he gets his hand cut off by the chainsaw. They scare off the creature with some high-pitched noise, and as the 5 of them are reunited, they see a mysterious woman shooting at something before they end up following her, and they discover Kaylee Hackett, dead in the pool. Nick clings to Abby, making comments of how she smells so good, before Abby pushes him into the pool and he freaks out. The group then take the strange and sick Nick into the pool house to try and get him to feel better. Back on the shoreline, Jacob and Emma are briefly reunited before another creature attacks them, causing Emma to fall into the water and Jacob to run straight into a bear trap before the other hunter, Jedediah, knocks him out. Back in the pool house, Nick is increasingly rude and strange to Abby before he throws her across the room and explodes, turning into one of these creatures. If Abby shoots at him, he will flee. If not, then Nick will sadly kill Abby before running off. A sudden knock on the door startles the group as the mysterious girl from before is revealed to be Laura. Laura tells the group of how her and Max were taken prisoner by Travis Hackett, Mr. H's brother, for the past 2 months. She fills them in and reveals the lore of these werewolves, and how she and Max have escaped the jail. With Max being bit and turned into a wolf, she now has to kill the wolf that bit him in order to free Max from the curse. Under the pressure and the time restraints of the full moon ending soon, and her own bite slowly turning her into a wolf, Ryan and Laura go out to find Mr. H at the Hackett house. The remaining 3, or 2, go back to the main lodge where they find Emma in the car after she had previously gotten there after running through the woods and escaping the hunters and the werewolves. Eager to fix the car so that they can escape, Caitlin and Dylan head towards the scrapyard while Emma and Abby hide in the cellar. At the scrapyard, they have a close call with one of the wolves and escape with their lives, but without a working car. So they once again head back to the main lodge disappointed. Ryan and Laura have a rough start to their sneak attack, falling through a hole in the old quarry. They end up finding and freeing Jacob from a cage in the Hackett's basement before getting caught by the family. As Emma accidentally shoots Constance, Ryan is stabbed in his side, and while the both of them are able to escape, they are sadly separated. Bobby chases Ryan around the house while Jedediah and Travis follow Laura. After a few confrontations, Laura is able to find Ryan right in time as he is bleeding out after the removal of the blade. She ends up biting him to heal him before they come across the werewolf Chris Hackett chained up in the attic. As they collapse into the main part of the house, Laura explodes into a wolf, leaving Ryan to shoot Chris, causing Laura and the others bitten by him to turn back to normal. Travis then reveals that Chris was not the first, but Silas, a sideshow act in a traveling group called Harem Scarum. Eager to end the curse that's been haunting his family for 6 years, he, Laura, and Ryan head out to find the dangerous white wolf Silas. Back in the lodge, Caitlin and Dylan are attacked by a werewolf that's presumed to be Caleb Hackett, and depending on if Abby and Emma found the silver shells or not, you can either shoot Caleb, killing him with silver, or you can lock him in the freezer if you were able to find and keep the stuffed animal from the beginning of the game, thus securing the survival of our 4 main characters in the lodge. For the grand finale of the game, Laura, Ryan, and Travis drive to where Laura and Max had swerved off the road 2 months ago. The car is suddenly attacked by Silas, and after fighting him off, Travis reveals that the performers were killed because his niece Kaylee wanted to free the scared-looking boy, Silas. They used fire as a distraction, but it simply grew out of control, and while they let Silas escape, he bit Caleb in the process. So the trio end up following the trail until they find Silas sleeping in the burned-down remains of his cage before they shoot him with silver and end the curse of Hackett's Quarry. Geez, that's a way longer recap of the story than what I had anticipated, and I didn't even touch on Eliza or the dead hikers or the podcast, but don't worry, because we will get to that a little later on. I will very quickly walk you through my playthrough of the game. I was probably the least prepared for this game, had the least amount of knowledge than any of my Dark Pictures playthroughs. Since I had only seen one playthrough and I was a bit bored with it, none of the events really stuck out to me, so I definitely forgot a lot and got a lot of people killed. I am really looking forward to playing Season 2 of Dark Pictures without watching any playthroughs first, and actually, if you guys would like it, I am considering live streaming my playthrough for Directive 8020. This should be coming out in this fall, and then that way I don't have to describe my playthroughs in such depth in these video essays. Plus, it could also just be fun to play on livestream with you guys. So in my playthrough for the Quarry, I ended up kicking the cabin door open, but I did not take the stuffed bear. I also did not find Emma's silver bracelet. I had Abby and Nick kiss before having her try and save him, before she eventually ran to safety. I dropped and left the motor arm because I got really scared that Jacob was going to drown. Then I didn't shoot Jacob in the bushes, and when back at the cabin, I tried to get Ryan and Dylan on the same page with their conversations. I was also able to get Emma safely off the island without getting bit, and when she and Jacob reunited, I had Jacob hide and then try to pry open the bear trap. Next, I had Caitlin, Nick, and Abby hide as they escaped the house, before I eventually cut Dylan's hand off after he is bit. I accidentally kinda got Abby killed by not shooting Nick beforehand, and then during the flashbacks with Laura, I tried to be compliant, but I eventually found the needle that secures their escape. Since Emma was not bit, she went to hide out in the cellar while I got Caitlin and Dylan safely through the scrapyard scenes. I wasn't able to get Jacob out of the cage because I kinda messed up the numbers, so he did die later on when they cut the power. Sorry about that. And then I kind of killed Constance as well. Yeah, this is where things start to go really bad because everyone started to die. I obviously let Ryan get bit, but then I ended up killing Bobby and Jedediah because I stabbed Bobby beforehand, so they didn't have a weapon to defend themselves from Chris Hackett. I also didn't find the silver shells, and I kind of got Caitlin locked in the freezer because, I didn't think she'd get stuck in there, And that's also how, Dylan was killed as well, because Caitlin was trapped and Dylan didn't have anything to defend himself with. So, yeah, so Emma's the only one out of the main cabin to have survived. Sorry, my bad. However, I was able to shoot Silas, saving Nick and Caleb from the curse. Eliza was not very happy with me, and I also did struggle to find a lot of the tarot cards in the beginning of the game. So yeah, I was not her favorite person. I did, however, find a bunch of evidence and was able to clear the counselor's name during the podcast post-credits scenes. Look, as a whole, I really love the premise of this game. I love the setup of it, a bunch of stupid teenagers having a party in the woods, monsters that end up being werewolves start invading the scene, and personally, I think the choice to have it as werewolves is insanely cool since the different outcomes of each of them being infected comes into play. I think you can get 6 of the counselors infected depending on your choices, but I don't think you can get them all at once. I also love the inclusion of Eliza in this story. The fact that she is trying to manipulate you is something that I find to be really, really cool. I also personally love all of the character interactions and moments in the less popular endings of the game. However, no matter which ending you get, they all seem to fall short. All of the endings, they just felt off. They all seemed to be missing something, whether it was a character moment to close off a particular character's arc or developments, or if it was the plot that was left feeling a bit confusing. They were all basically incomplete, with many of the rare endings feeling like bits and pieces that should have been put together with other endings to make one grand finale. Like, we really should have been able to successfully kill Silas and then see Laura and Max reunite no matter what. Or vice versa, it would have been nice to see Jacob and Emma's interaction at the end as well, or have Jacob get confronted by just anyone in the main and most popular ending. To dive deeper into the issues that I have, the first problem is the lack of character developments. As I did in my Until Dawn video, I will be discussing each character individually later on, but just as a whole, so many of these characters didn't get any sort of growth or nearly enough background information about them. Now, I am aware different endings give you greater or lesser character depth, but when looking at the most popular outcomes and endings of the playthroughs in which Emma does not get bit and they are able to at least have the chance to kill Silas, many characters, namely Emma, Abby, Nick, and Jacob, they all start off as really great characters with a lot of potential to grow and change over the events of the night. But they all essentially have nothing to do or nothing going on with them in the end half of the game, so their characters just don't really go anywhere. Many pathways in which they grow, they have to first get bitten, since some of the character traits only come out when they are transforming into a wolf. But that often required failing the QTEs, and in all honesty, the QTEs were just really, really easy, so it wasn't that difficult to get them to survive and to miss those moments. It also doesn't help that these characters are so spread out, so they aren't really forced to face much confrontation or conflict amongst the group. Just for comparison, in Until Dawn, the entire group gets reunited in the basement, and so much chaos happens in that moment, as they are all under stress and their true colors come forward in that moment. There isn't a scene in the Quarry that even comes close to a moment of confrontation like this. This kind of leads me to what I feel is the core problem in the game. Between the counselors and the Hacketts, they had way too many characters to keep up with throughout the multitude of different endings and options, so it caused a lot of the characters to fall flat in the writing. Now, of course, many games and even films and TV shows, not every single character is going to have amazing development or amazing depth to them, and it's completely normal for some characters to be a bit two-dimensional. I mean, we saw it in Until Dawn, with Matt and Jess kind of getting the short end of the stick in terms of the character developments, simply due to their less screen time. But in The Quarry, I'd kind of argue that every single character, aside from Travis, Dylan, and Laura, needed a lot more development or work, so that they had something going on in every single ending. Because that main ending that was so common, it was just so incredibly disappointing with the characters at the end. Now, in defense of the writers, I will add that it is immensely challenging to give each character their due justice when the screen time is so limited to the size of the cast. One easy way that the writers could have added just a little bit more growth and development without cutting out the characters is to have something else happen after sunrise. I'm not saying that it had to be exactly like Until Dawn with the police videotapes, but having some sort of either a group reunion or just anything to clue us in on how these characters that we've grown to know over the night, may have changed or may be impacted by the events of the night, it just would have been nice to have at least something that gave us a bit more info. Aside from the incomplete feeling from the characters' writing, there were other moments in the games that the plot just felt off, maybe slightly stupid in the logic behind it, or just not thought through enough. The most frustrating issue that I think many of us faced was the issue of why they didn't talk about Silas and the origin of the curse sooner. I mean, it is common in many games and horror films that miscommunication or lack of communication often causes bad things to happen. And in this case, Travis not being open to Laura about the curse, it causes her to go on to kill Kaylee and then Chris. However, while it's still crazy that Travis didn't say anything to Laura earlier, what's more confusing and frustrating to me is that Bobby and Jedediah did not at all try to explain what is going on to the counselors. I'm not saying they had to explain everything or that the counselors had to believe them, but at the very least, a one-liner of something like, "Shh, we're trying to help you," or "we're here to help, here to protect you," something along those lines, it would have made a lot more sense than them expecting these teenagers to not fight you back when you're covered in blood and are chasing them through the woods. Now, again, in defense of the writers, I know they were trying to go for the misdirect of, ooh, big scary hunters gonna kill us kids, but since Nick gets attacked by something that is clearly not human so early on in the game and we see Bobby shoot at the wolf, many people in the reaction that I watched very quickly caught onto the fact that Bobby and Jedediah, they're not trying to hurt our counselors. So since the facade of them being bad is so easy to see through, the writers might as well have just gone all the way and had them say something directly to one of the counselors about wanting to protect them at some point throughout the night. It definitely got a bit tiring to see our counselors running and hiding from the hunters for the entire game. Another section of the game, or actually location in the game, that just didn't feel thought through enough, or felt like it was an idea that died out, was the marketplace that Jacob and Emma go to get food and drinks. The layout of that room felt very combat or action heavy. It definitely felt like we should have been revisiting that area due to all of the physical space that was there for us and the maze-like shelf layout that could maybe be used to sneak around later on. We also had that strange cage hallway thing that you had the option to leave open or closed. I'm still baffled as to why they didn't have a cool chase scene in that room. Having them trick one of the werewolves to follow one of them running through the cage, and whoever was the bait made it through that last door that you would then close and trap the werewolf in from both ends. That's really what I thought was going to happen. And again, it seemed like other people who played the game thought the same thing or something similar would happen. But we never returned to that location. The only purpose of that area in terms of the plot was to get the gun and to showcase that all fridge doors apparently lock behind you. But that is something that was also a minor frustration for me, since I had assumed that the reason the door would lock was because the fact that Jacob had picked the lock. Not that every single fridge door is going to lock behind you. That was just mildly infuriating. Now, I also had a big issue with what the werewolves can and can't smell and sense in this game. Now, in Until Dawn, the Wendigos react to movement, which allows the players to hide without being detected. But in the Quarry, it seems like they can't make up their mind. Obviously, they react the most to the smell, hence why the Hacketts cover themselves in werewolf blood when hunting as to not be detected. Obviously, Jacob also gets covered in blood, and he successfully hides in the bushes, escaping the werewolf. We also know that the wolves are attracted to noise, since the music at the scrapyard seems to summon Caleb, and also Chris says right when he leaves in the beginning to keep the noise down. Obviously, the werewolves can also see people, since we do get a few point-of-view shots with the wolves watching either Nick, Abby, or Emma. So my question is, how is Abby able to safely hide from the wolf after Nick gets attacked when she doesn't have any blood on her? And also, how are the three final characters, Travis, Laura, and Ryan, able to sneak up on Silas without having blood on them when they are making a fair amount of noise? I also personally don't believe that Silas would be asleep at that point because it wasn't that long ago that he was just attacking their car. So the ending was definitely a bit strange and didn't make a lot of sense in terms of technicalities. There is also the question of when can the wolf smell the infection on the person? Because in the case of Laura and Ryan, it seems like he doesn't know that they're infected and just attacks them anyway. But in the case of Caitlin fighting Caleb, or Dylan being left alone in the kitchen, Caleb actually smells the both of them and he can leave. So that's just another confusing part of their hunting senses and the rules around these werewolves. Going off of that, what are the rules about being bitten and infected? Now, I know I said earlier that 6 counselors can become werewolves. Nick is obviously unavoidable. Emma, Jacob, and Dylan can all be bit and they can all fully transform. And Caitlin and Ryan can be bit but can only begin to turn and they won't ever transform. But what about Abby? Well, Abby actually can get bit, but for some reason she never turns. And it's not even brought up ever again by the rest of the characters or by herself that she was ever bit. It is really, really strange to me because, that kind of changes the sort of rules around these creatures. That would then mean that she is somehow immune to the curse. And honestly, that just leaves me with way more questions that I won't ever get answers to, which is it's just really disappointing and a bit of an oversight on the creators. Now, I know there's a theory, or rather speculation, that Abby is bit by Kaylee Hackett in werewolf form, and that's why she doesn't transform because Kaylee Hackett is killed. But I personally don't really buy this story or reasoning, simply because of the fact that Abby is bit only a few moments after Nick was, and her transition should have been on par with his. We should have started to see a lot more signs of aggression just as Nick was becoming more and more aggravated with Abby. Her attitude and anger should have mirrored his up to the exact moment that Kaylee Hackett is shot and killed. Also, with Nick getting bit by Silas, to me it just makes a lot more sense that Silas is the one that bit Abby rather than Kaylee Hackett, since he is right there in the area and is probably already angered by being shot at by Bobby. But I don't know. There is no solid evidence on who bites Abby, and therefore this will just be one of the many things we are left to speculate about. Another strange moment that I felt needed just a little more oomph to it was when the ladder is broken. I know that Abby can die in this moment from the ladder if Emma turns into a werewolf. However, as I've already said, it's not super common for players to get Emma bit. And without her transformation, the ladder is a bit of an anticlimactic, what the heck is the point kind of moment. That whole section, when you get the more common outcome, it's actually a bit weird pacing-wise as well. I think because it's mixed in with the scrapyard and the Hackett house, which are really high-intensity scenes, that having this sudden dip in energy was definitely a bit strange. I think this issue kind of just goes back to the bigger problem of there being way too many characters all spread out in a bunch of different pathways, and sadly it causes the popular outcomes to feel incomplete with not much to do for some of our key characters. Since I've already brought it up, the pacing of this game as a whole is, in my opinion, just a bit of a mess. And with the characters being so spread out and us having to follow multiple locations at once, that definitely causes problems, but I think the pacing really suffers because the writers kind of shot themselves in the foot by having such a high intense moment and spike with the monster being revealed so early on and combining that spike with a slow anticlimactic ending. Now, most video games tend to follow a similar outline for pacing. One in which, while there are certainly key moments that escalate the energy, creating these hills and valleys, there is this consistent push and growth for more and more excitement, events, and energy to be at the end of the game. Think about that basic climax chart that you learn in elementary school. But while the Quarry starts off with the incredible energy in the beginning, with the car crash and the tension in the woods, it creates a wonderful and intriguing feel to the game, and is soon followed by the expected dip in energy as we are introduced to our core cast of characters. We then suddenly have this rush of events and spike up in energy as Nick is attacked by a monster, and then we immediately see the creature when we play as Emma on the island. While the writers could have kept growing and building up things as the story went on to counteract and better compete with this feel of the sudden spike, the energy instead is dragged back down with Laura and Max's flashback scenes, which makes it even harder to bring the energy back up to a more exciting ending. We do get a brief high with Caitlin, Dylan, and the scrapyard and cabin events, plus the Hackett house chase scenes, but sadly we end the game on a low note with the trio just casually shooting Silas, thus making the pacing feel like the highest point was in the middle and not the end, which is a very unnatural and very unfulfilling ending to any action-packed and thriller story. One thing that I do have to give credit on is the fact that the writers aren't afraid to go against the grain in terms of not doing this normal pacing. I like that Supermassive is always trying new things, whether it's the different forms of the don't move or the hiding mechanics that they always have, or if in this case it's just messing around with the formats. Sometimes things work and other times they don't, and while I personally feel like this pacing did not do good, I will always love this company for trying new things. Speaking of trying new things out, let's talk about some of the mechanics and the extras in this game. Something new that this game did was the mini cutscenes for the tutorials. I saw a lot of people saying that it took them out of the game and took them out of the experience, and while I kind of feel the same way, I also didn't mind it since they only occur in the very beginning and they do stop really early on. They were cute little videos that were obviously a stupid kind of funny, just a bit ridiculous to watch. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm a bit neutral to them. I wouldn't say I liked it, but I also wouldn't say they were a big problem. One thing that I do find a bit strange though was the slow fading in and fading out transitions. They really affected the pacing as they would sometimes cut the energy of the moment since they came in at weird times. The main moment that I'm thinking of that's coming to my mind is Caitlyn getting ready for the attack. She says her one line, and then it just fades out. It was just a bit strange. I also really didn't like the QTEs. I don't know why they made them so easy. I think having the different buttons like they normally do would have been a lot more effective and impactful. Since so many of the character developments kind of occur through failed QTEs, I don't understand why they wouldn't want to make the QTEs harder so that more people get those different endings. I also don't think the slow-mo that occurs during those QTEs was good. I personally found it to be very negative since I quite like the mad dash and chaos of chase scenes, so this slow motion cut kind of made me feel like, okay, come on, you can land on the board, like you're fine, just go. Like pick it up a little, like it just kind of dragged it down when I feel like the pacing should be picking up in those chase scenes. Something else that was very different in this game was the inclusion of the podcast episode. While I got a chuckle out of it the first time, it's just so long to listen to, and you couldn't even skip it, which I could definitely see being frustrating for people who like to speed play through the games and replay them to get different endings. So at the very least, they needed to add a skip button feature for that section. I do, however, have to point out the dedication that they put into by adding full podcasts over on their website. It is definitely a fun expansion on this story for those of us that might want to dive just a bit deeper into the lore of Hackett's Quarry. As for the hiding mechanic in this game, the holding of the breath feature, I think it's just a bit boring and could have been executed just a little bit better. It would have been cool if we had to leave at a certain time or else the people might come back. I don't really like the fact that we can just hold the button until the timer runs out and be fine almost every single time. I think having us choose to run or stay if they had the red go away in the middle of that timer, and having us pick if we had to run then or stay hiding, it definitely would have made it a bit more challenging and a lot more interactive. I am definitely curious to see which mechanic they will have for hiding moving forward in Dark Pictures Season 2, since this is now their third different type of the mechanic. I hope they keep trying new things though, because I always find it fun to try out new mechanics. While I did like the collecting of the evidence, it could have been really cool if we actually had to take the pictures ourselves, like what we had to do in The Devil and Me. I kinda wish that those two games had combined their evidence features, because I feel like that would make the most immersive experience for evidence collection mechanics in these games. And lastly, I personally love that they added a movie mode where you can even alter the character's individual traits. You get to see how that changes the story and how things will play out, and it's just a very creative way to be able to reach more people with the story. With the, I think it was 186 different types of endings in this game, I have a lot to talk about in terms of these characters. So without further ado, let's analyze them. The first character that I want to start off with is my favorite character in the entire game, and that character is Dylan. At first glance and in the beginning of the game, Dylan is just there for comedy, and his comedic personality remains throughout the entire game. But Dylan has the most consistent background and detail surrounding his character traits throughout every single pathway. While many of the core counselors' growth and even their character backgrounds aren't revealed unless certain less popular options occur, Dylan's character traits are kind of written into the permanent script a lot more. This gives us a greater understanding of him and therefore leads many of us to connect with him more than the other characters. We obviously have the conversation between him and Ryan as they walk to the radio hut. It is in that moment that it's revealed that Dylan is actually really smart and he's been putting on just a bit of a persona all summer long. But the best part about this is that just like Emily in Until Dawn, who is seen being resourceful, Dylan also has so many moments where his intelligence and resourcefulness kind of shines through. Obviously, the radio tech stuff is impressive, him thinking on the spot about feedback loop is genius, and he's also the first one to very quickly catch on that once bit, there's this crazy infection that starts to spread. I would also argue that him arming himself with a frying pan, while it's comedic, is still pretty resourceful, to just get anything that could help protect you. Maybe I'm too much of a Dylan stan, but I just think he's the best no matter what. Now, when Dylan turns and transitions into a wolf, just like any other character, his true inner emotions and seemingly true character traits come out. Dylan can be bit 2 times in the game, with each one giving a slight development in his character, but it's the first bite that causes a transition later on in the game. The first bite at the Radio Shack is probably one of the most memorable moments in the game, since so many people end up cutting off Dylan's hand with the chainsaw. But if you do not cut it off, and you get him safely through the events of the scrapyard with Caitlin, he will then transform into a werewolf. His fit of rage as he transitions is geared towards Caitlin as he screams at her to leave him and to get away, successfully warning and probably saving her life. There are 2 things that this seems to reveal about Dylan's true nature. The first is that he seems to push people away or keep them at a distance. When you combine his screaming as he transitions with his fake persona, the idea that Dylan is keeping everyone at arm's length is very apparent. The second thing that this shows is how much Dylan actually cares about his friends. Not only does he warn and save Caitlin in this moment, but if you get him bit in Chapter 8 by an infected Emma, he actually gets bit by pushing Caitlin out of the way of the charging werewolf's attack. Keep in mind, Dylan and Caitlin have both been pining for Ryan all summer long. They could have very easily turned enemies throughout the game, but Dylan is just a very caring person who deeply cares about his friends, despite all of these sarcastic comments that he keeps making about putting himself in danger. So yeah, Dylan, he's just the best. He's just a ride or die and the most consistent character throughout all of the endings of the game. Moving on to Laura, who is our main girl. She is definitely a fun character, and she is actually the only character that I would say has as close to a true character arc as possible. On the surface of her character, she's sometimes seen as a bit stagnant because she can be a bit stubborn and very one-track minded. Even though you can choose to play her just a little bit nicer in the prison scene, she is still going to be a bit impulsive and snappy and very determined to get what she wants, which in this case is to escape. She's seen being very resistant to the idea that she might have mixed up Kaylee and Chris, which showcases how she can be a bit proud and once again stubborn and set in her ways. When she is about to transform into the wolf, she is fighting tooth and nail to try and resist turning. She is so determined to shoot Chris Hackett, she is literally going against the nature of this curse as much as she can, fighting against this curse both physically and mentally as she tries not to turn before shooting Chris. Now, her character arc is really subtle, which is kind of why I like it a lot. The character arc that she goes through is transitioning from a caring person to a cold and heartless one. She starts off in the introduction worried for the safety of a woman who they might have hit on the road, saying that there might be someone hurt down here and that I have to go and check. She then shows that caring side of her once again when she spots Chris in the storm shelter. She's so concerned for someone that may or may not be hurt down there that she breaks into the cellar to go and check. Then, after being imprisoned, her determination to escape pushes aside her feelings of care for Travis, and similarly, she grows to not care about anyone else except her and Max, and then depending on how you play the game, you may have her grow to care about Ryan. I also really like that this character arc can go further in the sense that she can go on to directly kill Travis and Ryan. It's really the ultimate nice character turned evil simply because she feels she has to do it. Max is a really funny character, but he doesn't really have an impact on the story. He's kind of just an accessory to Laura's story, and while the writers could have built his character up a little bit more after he is cured of the curse, they instead give him this insanely cheap death scene, and I just feel like that whole section should have been cut out of the game because it felt so stupid, and I hated that moment. I personally think that the only way they should have included that scene is if they were going to expand on his character more, or if Emma dies on the island. I feel like then it's a good inclusion to have him walk around there. But other than that, it really added nothing, and the writers just overall didn't give Max a chance to grow, and they didn't really fill out his character, aside from the college letter drama that happens very briefly. As for Emma, oh, Emma. I go back and forth on her character a lot. She definitely has her badass cool moments on the island, and she definitely has some likable qualities and moments, but I can't get past that kiss. The only way I can describe Emma is that she reminds me a little bit of Mike from Until Dawn, in the sense that they're both not great people, but are able to get away with a lot of stuff and still end the day being liked by many. I mean, Emma is so incredibly selfish and inconsiderate to poor Abby. Like, seriously, just imagine your best friend knowing that you have a crazy crush on a guy. I mean, the whole camp actually knows that Abby has a crush on Nick at this point, and then your friend goes and kisses him. And not just kisses him, but as Jacob put it,
I mean, I can't believe you fucking Frenched him.
like, how selfish and self-centered do you have to be to do that? And then also, it's never really brought up again after the moment. I kind of wish it would have been brought up between Emma and Abby, or have another confrontation about that moment later on. But sadly, that was not the case. So let's move on to some of her transformations. If Emma gets bit later in the game when she is running through the woods, passing through the hunters, and gets attacked by a werewolf, if she gets bit in that moment and ends up in the storm cellar, she will either transition and attack Abby, or she'll end up alone in the storm cellar, insulting her viewers on camera. I personally love the insulting transition better, because I think Emma is good at hiding the part of her that is a bit cocky, so to see it come out in full force as she transforms into a werewolf is really cool. If she doesn't transition, however, and Abby is left alive, you can actually get a really cool moment where Abby calls out Emma for always needing to be the center of attention. It ends up being a nice moment where Emma kind of reflects on her actions, and she also goes on to express how grateful she is to Abby for being friends with her. This moment is where I really wish they would have brought up, or at least given us the option to bring up, why she kissed Nick. I would have loved to see Abby confront Emma in this moment, because I truly wonder if Emma would have leaned into her more selfish and cocky side of her personality, or if she would take a moment to reflect like she did in this prior conversation. I also really wish that we would have gotten a larger reaction out of Emma if Abby is killed by Nick. She acts very shocked and timid and then just seems to move on with her life. And now that I know that she actually cares about Abby and truly sees her as a best friend, I just feel like her reaction wasn't big enough. Even if it was delayed, like she's in disbelief when she first hears about it in front of Dylan and Caitlin, and then alone in the cellar, it would have been nice if she kind of reacted more and had some more remorse about the last time she saw her best friend, when she was, again, kissing her best friend's crush. I just feel like something a bit more emotional from her as a reaction to her friend dying would have been nice. It would have been nice to see. In all of the different endings with Jacob, I personally love that even if you play Jacob as the most remorseful and kind options, Emma still won't get back together with Jacob. I find that it's very telling of her character how she is sticking to the plan that she made from the beginning of the summer, that it is just a summer fling, no matter what either of them feel, because she does actually admit that she still has feelings for him. So I feel it's very telling that she sticks to the plan no matter what. Just as a whole, I do wish that Emma had a lot more to do in the more popular ending, because once she escapes that island, she doesn't have much to do, and her character definitely dies down or falls off towards the end of the story, with nothing for her to do, no real conclusion, or any sign of growth or change at the end of the night. In regards to Jacob, he is just a self-conscious guy who is trying to have things his way no matter what. I mean, I could probably leave Jacob's character analysis at just that, but let's just take a look a bit further. Jacob really is willing to do anything to get Emma back, and I personally love all the interactions between him and Emma if they meet up in the woods after Emma is bit by Max and transforms back to normal at the end of the game. I love the fact that we as players can essentially pick if he is going to be a self-centered jerk or somewhat apologetic and remorseful of his actions. I like the fact that we get to decide how he ends the game. No matter which way that ends though, she does not take him back, so he is left to reflect on his horrible and selfish actions from the night. In the most popular outcome without Emma getting bit, We have him sort of breaking down in the woods, and while I do like that we get some sort of reaction from him as he realizes the fault in his actions, I think that I like the confrontation much better than him just kind of feeling sorry for himself. Because if he's just moping around the whole time, then he didn't really learn anything, and in the confrontation, he is forced with the harsh reality of his actions and his faults. Part of me really wishes that there would have been some sort of group confrontation about him sabotaging the car, because it really would have forced some great character development and moments that we never got from this game. At the end of the day, I'm just going to imagine that the Emma and Jacob confrontation happens no matter what, because that's the only way that I enjoyed any amount of Jacob's character on screen. I like the payoff that we get from those endings, so I'm just going to pretend that that's how it always ends for him. As for our favorite artist, Abby, she is definitely a bit of a stereotypical outsider. She's a bit socially awkward, keeps to her own a little bit, and she has her art, and she is just overall much more reserved and timid in her actions. Abby is just an all-around good person and is such a sweetheart. I think the moment her and Nick share, if they do not kiss each other, shows how much she cares about the little details. This is seen by her kind of holding on to the fact that Nick didn't notice her when they first met. She remembers every detail of the camper having the accident and how caring she felt Nick was. She remembers and notices how every single counselor kind of treats their kids, even stating that Emma and Jacob would tease them, but Nick does not. Earlier in the game, she also states that she has everyone's emails, which is something very minor that Abby still remembers and seems to care about. Her holding on to all of these little details can be seen as a negative, as she comes across a bit indecisive and definitely appears to overthink her options sometimes. In her possible confrontation with Emma in the storm shelter, it's revealed that she has been trying to be like Emma and wish she was like Emma for almost the entire summer. That moment is really cool, as she then goes on to say that she's almost grateful that she's not like Emma. If Abby is alone, however, in the cellar, you get a brief moment of frustration from her, as she is just fed up with the night. Which, while it definitely shows a little bit more of how Abby just isn't naturally a social butterfly and is clearly out of her comfort zone at camp, it doesn't really give much more insight aside from that, and it's kind of something we already know. So just like with Emma, when it comes to the popular ending, I feel like Abby needed a lot more things to do at the end so that we could get a better hold of her character traits and developments in the game. When it comes to Nick, there isn't much that we know about him. He is very akin to Jessica from Until Dawn in the sense that he is the victim of the night. There is also only one chance you have to get any character development. Just like Abby, the only real info that we get is if they don't kiss after the bonfire. They will instead have that heartfelt conversation in which we learned about how Abby views Nick as a genuinely nice guy. We hear that he was kind to his campers, and we see that he can be a bit dumb, which kind of causes him to be perceived as rude from Abby, based off him and Abby's first meeting. But as a whole, Nick definitely is a genuinely good guy. There is, however, the interesting development that you can say as Abby, in which it's revealed that Nick is trying to be just like Jacob. And I personally love this connection between him and Abby. Both of them are trying to be like their bolder, extroverted friends, and it definitely causes them more problems than just being themselves. Nick's transition scene is really cool, as we do get moments of insecurity coming to the surface, as he seems to almost hate on himself and think so little of himself that Abby would never like him and that she's only saying she does out of pity for him. That self-sabotage is really sad to see, and I just wish we would have gotten more from Nick, because I really like this development. It would have been really nice to see something happen to him after the night ended, but I guess that just wasn't meant to be. As for Caitlin, she is just a complete badass, and she is a very likable character with her sarcasm and her action-filled showdowns at the end of the game. She is, however, a bit sneaky and not morally the best character, based on her helping Jacob break the car and the truth or dare kiss being her idea. However, my issue is that we get no true background information on her. We don't know her the way that we know Laura or Dylan, and what's frustrating for me is Dylan is with her during the showdown, and to me that felt strange because there were times I felt I should be playing as Dylan and not Caitlin, simply because I know more about Dylan and I felt I had a stronger connection to him than I did with Caitlin at times. Caitlin really is a fascinating and intriguing character since she knows so much about cars, so much about how to shoot and use guns, and she worked in the nurse's hut over the summertime, so there's just so many things I want to know about her. It would have just been so much more interesting if we could learn about her background and how she knows those things. It's also just very frustrating to me that we don't have more info on Caitlyn, since her character model and facial reconstruction is the best out of the whole group. The developers probably did this since it's Brenda Song playing this role, and most people in their target age group of young adults would recognize her instantly, so they probably felt a need to make sure that she always looked good. But in this case, it kind of backfired since we don't know anything about her. Also, since she never transforms even if she's bit, we never get that sudden realization or inner moment of character traits coming to the surface that we do with other characters. Overall, I just found myself wanting more background on her character. When it comes to Ryan, he is probably my least favorite character. I find it really frustrating that he is the main guy at the end of the game. In the main plotline or the most popular ending, he doesn't really have any memorable persona change or a particular event that makes him super likable. However, the game seems to always give him the option to be a hero type of character, with the first moment being when he rescues Nick. That felt a bit off because I think many of us wanted to go as Caitlyn since we just saw her shooting the gun really well. And yet the game continues to give us chances to play Ryan as this strong leader. The next example coming to my mind being when Laura finishes telling the group her story, and we then get the choice to either decide what to do as Ryan or ask Caitlyn for advice. We as players are going to be naturally drawn towards Caitlyn because of the scenes that we shared with her earlier, and since we have zero connection to Ryan at all. We have no desire to take this unknown character as the sort of leadership in the group. I think the writers kind of made it difficult for themselves because they started Ryan off as this brooding loner as they tried to make this giant jump from someone who is comfortable on his own, doing his own thing, only lifting his own weight based on the opening scene where he's not helping anyone else, to all of a sudden transitioning to this hero who is ready to sacrifice his life for everyone. It's a very weird jump in personality, and I really don't think it makes much sense. However, there is one key scene in Chapter 5 in a less popular pathway that does make this work, and I am so confused as to why they didn't put this in for the popular one as well. We get to this particular scene if you do not break the door down in the beginning for Emma and Abby's bags. Since the cabin door is shut, once Caitlyn, Nick, and Abby make their way to the Radio Shack, they have to first break down the cabin door in order to hide from the monster, causing the werewolf to go and attack the cabin. Ryan will then have a really cool fight scene as he leaves the safety of the cabin to go and try and save his friends. This event, this scene, really helps connect the dots a lot more, and probably would have been the scene that would help us make Ryan more of a leader, giving us an incentive to click the more leadership options that the dialogue is giving us. And they could have easily had this scene in the more popular option as well, and just have him go outside to get the wolf off of the radio so that Dylan can safely hook up the wire. It's such a key moment in Ryan's development. I really don't understand why the writers wouldn't want this in both possible pathways. Another issue or dislike that I had with Ryan was the hint of problems with his family and sister's safety that are only brought up in the beginning and very briefly suggested at in the end. There are a few reasons that I have a problem with this. The first being that it's hardly ever brought up. It's clearly something that Ryan is immensely concerned with, but it's only mentioned and then it's dropped. And that felt like just a bit of a dropped plotline. The second and the bigger reason that I don't like this is because I feel like it was a huge missed opportunity. Ryan has clearly been going to this summer camp for a few years based on the picture of a younger version of him, Caleb, and Kaylee that hangs on one of the walls. It's also implied through his close relationship with Chris Hackett as well. So my question is, why wasn't his sister at summer camp? Now, I feel there's so many reasons that the addition of his younger sister being there would have helped this story in so many ways. The first is obviously to further Ryan's own character traits and growth as the night went on. I think that jump from loner to hero would be so much more impactful if he is just trying to protect his younger sister. The next and the bigger reason is because this game already has a strong emphasis on family being important. We have two families that are essentially fighting against each other, Eliza and Silas versus the Hackett household. So it would have been so cool if we also had some tie or semblance of a third family amongst the counselors. It would have given us another example and style of how family is important and how it's showcased across the 3 different groups. So as a whole, I'm actually really disappointed in Ryan's character because he is very boring and flat in the main and popular ending when the writers clearly put some amount of thought into some of the other pathways. It's really just upsetting that he ends up in the main trio when he does not garner that sort of connection and respect from the players. Now let's move on to the Hackett family. Travis is a really well-developed character. He starts off as a scary enemy who is then revealed to be a bit of a tormented soul as he has been struggling with feelings of guilt for his and his family's actions in relation to everything, not only just the fire and the guilt from that event, but also the issues of the cover-up with the 2 hikers that causes him to not be able to kill Laura and Max out of guilt for his previous actions, despite the fact that's what his family probably would have done. I do think that he is a bit stupid for not telling Laura about Silas sooner, and I know that he doesn't want to reveal the events of his family's involvement in freeing Silas, but he very well could have explained it to Laura by simply saying that Silas is the first, and saying that it was his brother that got bit. It could have been nice to see him draw the connections of how Laura cares about Max and he cares about his brothers to kind of get her on his side. I do also really wish, and I will always wish, that we could have gotten an option for Laura and Travis to work together the entire time, because it could have been a really interesting development to see how Travis's character would have been able to change if he was to essentially go against his family's back in order to work with Laura. When it comes to Chris Hackett, part of me wishes that we had just a few more moments with him before his fits of rage started to kick in. We can see him struggling and beginning to transition as his sudden yelling and panic seems to throw off the counselors. We do gather from Ryan that Chris Hackett is a genuinely good guy. He helped Ryan with his family problems, and he obviously loves running the camp for the kids, considering the fact that he remained open over the past 6 years of this curse affecting his family. But that being said, he is incredibly dumb and ill-prepared, because how do you schedule the last day of camp to be on the day of a full moon? Like, come on, man, it's a rookie mistake. He's had 6 years to be able to perfect this, and he still messed it up. I mean, to be perfectly honest, the whole Hackett family is just very ill-prepared, even though this is something they've been dealing with for so long. When looking at Bobby, he seems to be ex-military based on the dog tag found in the main cabin. While he's definitely big and scary and full of muscle, I don't think that he would actually intentionally kill any of the counselors on purpose. The whole knife in Ryan's side is kind of played for giggles, as he kind of seems to have forgotten that he's the one that stabbed Ryan in the first place. He may look scary, but he's pretty harmless on his own. Jedediah and Constance, it is said that they used to run the camp together, and in the game, Constance is definitely a fierce, family-driven woman who is the person in charge in the household. From the letter Kaylee Hackett wrote, we get the idea that Constance can be a bit too overbearing in her desires to keep her family safe, as we see that it cost Kaylee her happiness, as she seems to have perhaps run away to go and see more than just her family's land. Jedediah, he doesn't really have much going on with him, and while I think that he is supposed to sort of snap and lose his cool and become really evil and scary if Constance dies, I kind of just found myself wanting more lines and more emotion from his character. I did want to get to know him more, or at least have a bit more of a dramatic killing spree once Constance is shot. Now, let's talk about my girl Eliza. As I said in the beginning of this, I really like the fact that she is trying to manipulate the players to act upon her wishes and desires to kill all of the Hacketts. It's a really cool concept to have a sort of variety in these breaking of the fourth wall sections. I mean, the curator for the most part is trying to help you just ever so slightly, and he's never trying to trick you or act against you. Dr. Hill in Until Dawn was definitely creepy and you could tell something was off right away, but in a twisted way, he was still trying to help you, or rather help Josh throughout the game. So having a curator that's there for ill intentions and for her own desires is a really cool thing. I do, however, wish that we had a lot more of her voices during the decision-making sections of the game. I think that the ending of Laura hesitating to shoot Silas because of Eliza's cries is a really cool idea, and I feel like that if she had made some sort of noises and cries a bit earlier in the game through other important decisions, it might have made her evil moment at the end just a bit more intense and a bit more of a struggle. If Eliza was there guiding us to safety earlier on, we may feel more inclined at the end to listen to her and not shoot Silas. Look, I have to start wrapping up this video because it's getting way too long. But before I do, I wanted to just throw some quick speedballs out there of things that I liked or things that I have questions about. Like, why don't the Hacketts have motorbikes or quads in the woods? Like, I know the werewolves will probably hear them, but the fact that they're just walking around all night long in the woods, it's a bit strange. Like, they need some speed, you know? These werewolves can run really fast and they're expected to keep up on foot. They need a little more speed than that. I love the additions of the toy and the bracelet being things that affect the ending but are found in the very beginning of the game. It's always really cool when something so minor has such a huge impact on the ending. Honestly, this game wasn't that scary. I kind of feel that because it was so long, it needed some more scares, and I can't believe that I'm saying this, but part of me kind of wanted some more jump scares to keep me on my toes in the second half of the game. My next question is, why dump a body and barbed wire in the lake close to the shoreline and the docks? Like, at least take a boat in the middle of the lake and dump it in there, or at least somewhere far away from the docks. That's like rule number 1 about hiding a body. I also just want to say I love the addition of the wolf's point of view. I personally wish that we had a bit more clarification on why Caleb and Kaylee weren't restrained or trapped before they turned into werewolves from the full moon that night. I think we are supposed to gather that they ran away and they must have messed up the timing, but still, they've been dealing with this curse for 6 whole years. They should know the drill by now. Now, with that out of the way, please enjoy these moments that immediately mirrored or made me think of Until Dawn, whether it's through similar one-liners or death kills that are very similar as well. I found these comparisons kind of fun to watch and put together, and some of them are probably a bit of a stretch, but what can I say? I'm an Until Dawn obsessed girl, so I'm gonna connect the crazy dots.
Oh, wow! Oh, nice steering, Tex.
Jinkies.
Wow, nice shooting, Tex.
All right, I'm bad. I'm a badass.
So to sum up my feelings on the Quarry as a whole, I just feel immensely frustrated and disappointed with the game because there are so many great moments in this story and I absolutely love the setup and the premise of it, but the endings just leave me disappointed because they feel like bits and pieces of what should have been one complete ending full of reunions and confrontations to further the characters' growth. The fact that this cast was so large and there were so many different endings is definitely why the writing suffered, and without any hint or clue as to how the group is different once the sun rose that morning, it definitely made the ending feel a bit lackluster, especially with there being such a mild finale scene where they go up and casually shoot Silas. Listen, I love the creativity Supermassive Games has, and I love seeing them try new things, but I just can't deny the fact that I am just a little disappointed by the end result of this game that was supposed to be their big sequel. I am, however, looking forward to playing Dark Pictures Season 2, and let me know down below if you'd want to see me live stream my playthrough. If anyone made it this far into the video, thank you so much for hearing me out, as this video is much longer than my Until Dawn one. If you made it to this point, let me know by leaving a little full moon emoji in the comments down below, and please consider hitting that subscribe button, as it would be amazing to get to 1,000 subscribers before my birthday on October 1st. As always, if you guys like my discussion, please hit that like button down below and leave your thoughts in the comments section. While you're down there, click subscribe to see more videos from me, and turn on notifications if you want to be notified whenever I post a new video. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I will see you future souls next time. Bye, guys.